Good morning, everyone. It is Tuesday, March the 31st, 2020. It is currently 11:28 a.m. Central Time, and yes, you probably know where I'm at. I am here at Victory Baptist Church, located in the middle of nowhere, Texas. I'm right here, and again, I always say this, am I in front of the microphone or behind the microphone? I don't know. To me, I'm in front of it, but you always hear radio talk show hosts saying behind the microphone. But I am here speaking into this microphone live from Victory Baptist Church. Yes, it's March the 31st. Yes, it's Tuesday. Yes, it's the year 2020. And yes, we are in the middle of a pandemic. The coronavirus that is spread around the world, COVID-19, that continues to infect people and continues to kill people, and it continues to dominate pretty much everything. I was looking at some numbers. I need to do my own podcast on this, but I was looking at some numbers from some podcast companies, and it's interesting. They were talking about how the amount of podcasts being listened to has dropped by 10%. I guess that's overall numbers for all podcasts. They have dropped around 10% during this time of this pandemic. And there's a lot of discussion on some of the podcast apps talking about why. They've offered suggestions. Maybe most people listen to podcasts when they commute. If they're not going to work, they're not listening to it. Some thought the numbers would increase because everyone is sitting at home. But clearly, a lot of people are sitting at home not listening to podcasts. However, I believe in Europe, the number one podcast in Europe, I'll have to find the news article, I saw it a little while ago, is about, guess what? COVID-19 and the coronavirus. So maybe your podcast is going to lose listeners unless you are talking about COVID-19 and the coronavirus. Maybe that's the only way to increase numbers. Who knows? I think it's interesting, but yes, we are in the middle of it. And yes, not only are we in the middle of it, it continues to dominate conversation and dominate discussion. Now, as I stated yesterday, you can talk about this from a political point of view, from a cultural point of view, from an economic point of view, but this is the Theology Central podcast, right? I try to look at everything from a theological point of view. So yesterday and multiple days in the past, I have tried to look at this as it relates to the church. How is this going to impact the church? What should churches do? How should Christians respond? How should Christians act? Talking about the divisions that are happening within Christianity and how people are divided. And then yesterday, I said that this whole situation had taken another turn because we had a pastor who was arrested for holding church services on Sunday. And guess what? I got in my car, it feels like about an hour ago. I had to go by a couple of places, but I got in my car and I turned on Christian radio, and the entire time I was in my car, guess what? The conversation was on COVID-19 and this pastor being arrested in Florida. Oh, wow. It dominated the entire hour of conversation. There was like 4 people involved in the conversation. There was some division. Not everyone agreed that, some said he shouldn't have had church. Some say, well, he shouldn't have. Some say he shouldn't have had church. Some say he should. Some say he shouldn't have had church, but he shouldn't have been arrested. It seemed like almost everyone agreed that he shouldn't have been arrested, but it was interesting. And I also found out something else I did not know. According to the female that was speaking on Christian radio this morning, this was on American Family Radio. And I've got to kind of paraphrase this because obviously I was in the car, so I didn't have the ability to write this down. So I've got to paraphrase the quote, but basically, or I'll paraphrase the idea because obviously I can't really give you a direct quote, but basically she was saying this: isn't it interesting that now we are told that this pandemic is going to peak on Easter? Don't you find that suspicious? Remember, President Trump wanted all the churches to be opened again on Easter, but now we're being told, no, you can't do that because the disease is going to peak on Easter. It sounds suspicious to me. It sounds like, wait, President Trump was wrong? Well, that couldn't be. So she was implying, in fact, she went on and pretty much explicitly said that this is being used to stop Christians from going to church on Easter and celebrating the resurrection, that this is all, that like, this is suspicious. That's not really when it's going to peak. That she was questioning the validity of the reports, like somehow that we were being misled, that we're being manipulated, and this was being used to stop us from worshiping, and celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And when that kind of stuff is being stated on Christian radio, you just have to shake your head and go, so now have we turned into Conspiracy Central? Are we now, basically the Alex Joneses of broadcasting? I mean, she gave no proof. No, she had nothing to back up her claim. And clearly she was implying that, wait, this is not as serious. Basically her implication was, this is not as serious as everyone's making it out to be. They're just trying to keep us from going to church on Easter. And if you take that to its logical conclusion, so then what should we possibly do? We should possibly disregard what they're telling us and show up on church on Easter, because that, they're simply trying to stop us. And when you hear that, you just want to go, hey, excuse me, ma'am. You do realize that everything is going to be shut down, not just churches, beaches, bars, concerts, sports. It's not just an attempt to stop the church. It's just Christians sometimes have a persecution complex. Anything that's done, they're out to get us. They're out to destroy our faith. They're out to stop us. They're out to end Christianity. Now, there is no question that there is almost a hatred in some parts of our society towards Christianity. There's no question about that. We are in very much a post-Christian society. There is an antagonism towards Christianity, a hatred towards Christianity, and I do understand that, but we can't allow that reality to give us this complex that anytime something happens, that they're coming for us, that they're at the door, we're being persecuted. It's just crazy. But yeah, that I did not realize that of all the conspiracy theories I've heard. So now the reason. We're being told that the virus is going to peak here in the United States on Easter. It's all a ploy to stop the worship of the resurrection. This is a ploy. And I'm just shaking my head going, come on. But the discussion was on the pastor who was arrested. Now, yesterday I did almost an hour conversation about that. I tried to look at it from all different perspectives. I talked about it. And so we're going to just return once again to that. I'm going to show you how it was covered this morning on NPR. They did a very brief segment on it. I'm going to play that audio clip, and then I've got an update because now Pastor Rodney-Howard-Browne, the one who was arrested, the one who I disagree with theologically and don't even know if he should be even classified within the world of biblical Christianity, but that's neither here nor there. That's a theological disagreement. Right now, I'm just trying to look at him as a pastor of a church and how what happens to him could impact the rest of us. I'm just trying to look at it from that perspective. Constitution, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble. There's lots of issues here. And yes, as I said yesterday, Christians are becoming divided on it. And I said this was going to become a big issue. Well, that pastor now has a legal team. And it sounds like they're going to file some kind of lawsuit. Sounds like this is going to become a legal battle. And I'm still trying to find, there was a video yesterday evening of Pastor Rodney-Howard-Browne responding, him directly. I tried to find it this morning and I did not. If anyone out there can find a video dated yesterday or today's date of Pastor Rodney-Howard-Browne responding to the arrest, and if he indicates in that video what his plans are, please send that to me at newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com immediately, and we'll do a part 3 of this to offer that update, because I want him to be heard for himself. I like for the person to be heard for themselves instead of listening to what people say what they said. I like to hear for themselves. Just like yesterday, I played the entire press conference with the sheriff because they didn't just hear what he supposedly said, but I want you to hear it from yourself. I love to do that when I can. Sometimes trying to find the video clips and the audio clips sometimes can be difficult. But if you know where it is, email it to me at newsif@yahoo.com. I'll definitely grab the audio and play it for you. But so it's going to become a legal battle. What we need to watch is what happens on Sunday. What happened? Are they going to meet on Sunday? And if they do, how far is the government officials in Florida going to take this? How far are they going to push back? Are they going to show up in the parking lot with cops, with guns, drag people out and arrest them, shut down the building? I mean, we have reports that in New York, they're being told that houses of worship that do not comply, they're going to be shut down. They're going to just be shut down indefinitely. Well, that's going to be by force. And this is really going to intensify. This is going to intensify the division. This is going to intensify the conflict, because if the government pushes back in a very forceful way, then many churches maybe who were willing to comply, they may then get basically no. Now we're going to take a stand. Now we're going to have church services, and this is something that I'm really thinking from a theological Christian perspective. This is what we really need to watch. Again, I would challenge, I would implore churches to go along with this right now. And let's not turn this into some major battle and fight, but we'll have to see. I think government officials really need to think about how they're going to handle this as well. And it is interesting. I think this is interesting. This all really comes down to a government officials determining what is an essential business and what is a non-essential business. If they deem it essential, it stays open. If they deem it not essential, it's supposed to close. I can kind of understand a pastor saying, no, what I do is essential. I can kind of see that, right? I mean, if hundreds of people can pack into a grocery store, and I do understand food is essential, well, then a pastor could argue 500 people packing into a church is essential. But who gets to define it? And if the government gets to define it, are we to obey it? I mean, this lots of questions. And I think we have, again, Christians, please, Christians, talk about it amongst yourselves, okay? Remember, we don't want to be fighting about this in public. The world needs to hear the message of the gospel. The world needs to hear that we have answers to what is happening. We live in a fallen world. The wages of sin is death. Because sin is in the world, death occurs in all kinds of different ways. The hope and the answer is Jesus Christ and his death, burial, and resurrection. We need to try to be letting the world see that, not us fighting about it. Now, amongst ourselves, yes, there's going to be some disagreements. But we also have to try to work together to come up with the best solution. I wish other pastors now, would call Pastor Rodney-Howard-Browne and go, come on, is this the right thing to do? Is this the battle? Is this the hill you want to die on? Is this the battle you want to fight? Or should we approach this in a different way? He's a mega church. He's got all kinds of money. He can literally be broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. He could go live on the air 24/7. He could bring in him, associate pastors and teachers in that church, and they literally could do a 24-hour-a-day marathon of Bible teaching, of they believe in divine healing services. They could do all those things that they want to do. Why not do that? Why, instead of fight this battle? I mean, he's got a YouTube channel. I just looked, and I mean, thousands of views. Just go live on YouTube 24/7. Just put a camera in the sanctuary and have one pastor preach, then have 2 or 3 people come up there from the worship team to do praise and worship, do your healing thing, have someone else teach, pray, whatever you want to do. You could just do a 24-hour marathon. If I had the staff and if I had enough people right now who I knew who would teach the Bible, I would say, hey, log into my Spreaker account and teach for an hour. And then we'll have someone else log in and teach for an hour. We'll have someone else log in and teach for an hour. I would create a team of people and just go 24/7. I currently don't have, obviously, that team and know enough people willing to do that. But I mean, churches can do that. Why not just make that your goal? I don't know. But let's listen to how the news covered it this morning. It was I thought we were going to go far more in depth on this and bring in some people to argue back and forth. Maybe the world, it'll be interesting to see how the world covers this ongoing issue with churches refusing to obey, and how the Christian world spent an hour today just talk. This point of view. He shouldn't have been arrested. This is they're using this to shut us all down. We're going to lose our religious freedoms. It was just, that was the talk. And then it's just interesting on NPR. Well, we got this. Listen carefully.
A megachurch pastor in Florida was arrested yesterday. His name is Pastor Rodney-Howard-Browne, and he was charged with unlawful assembly for continuing to hold large worship services despite public health orders to close those gatherings down. Here's NPR's Tom Gelton.
Howard-Browne is the co-founder and pastor of a church called The River at Tampa Bay. It's said to have 4,000 members. In recent days, he questioned the seriousness of the coronavirus pandemic, vowed to keep his church open until biblical end times, and told his parishioners God will protect them. After local authorities issued a ban on gatherings of more than 10 people, law enforcement officers visited his church to warn Howard-Browne that worship is considered a non-essential service. But the pastor refused to meet with them, and he went ahead with his services on Sunday.
I know that they trying to beat me up, but we are not a non-essential service.
Speaking during the service, Howard-Browne told the hundreds who showed up not to worry because the law was on his side, specifically the First Amendment.
Not only the right of free speech, but the right to as a peaceful assembly and to practice what we believe. Suddenly we are demonized because we believe that God heals.
Howard-Browne repeatedly insisted that his church members could expect supernatural intervention to keep them from getting sick. But authorities in the Tampa area were determined to show the ban on gatherings was to be taken seriously. Sheriff Chad Chronister, after consulting with the state attorney, announced that Howard-Browne faced arrest for intentionally and repeatedly disregarding emergency orders.
His reckless disregard for human life put hundreds of people in his congregation at risk, and thousands of residents who may interact with them this week in danger.
Chronister said the goal is not to stop anyone from worshiping, but the safety and well-being of our community must always come first, he said. A short time later, the pastor turned himself in and was taken into custody. He spent about 40 minutes behind bars, but was then freed after posting bail. The charge he faces is a second-degree misdemeanor. Tom Gelton, NPR News.
That's how it was covered this morning on NPR News on their program Morning Edition. Just a little over 2 minutes. Basically, the information. They didn't really get into any of the legal questions or the issues or have any commentary. Now, maybe they will report on it in a more in-depth way this afternoon during their program All Things Considered, which you can subscribe to as a podcast and you can listen to on your NPR affiliate station in your particular area. So you may want to do that. But there are some updates to the story, and I've got them right here. A couple of things to just remember. Now, I want you to hear what I'm going to say here because I want to be very fair, and I don't want to be misunderstood. I believe Pastor Rodney-Howard-Browne's belief in theology on divine healing, that healing is guaranteed here and now, his whole charismatic craziness, hearing from God, all of the stuff that he's been involved in. Just look up the history of Pastor Rodney-Howard-Browne, all of the nonsense. I mean, there's been enough discussion about him in Christian books to fill up a couple of hours of study. But I believe he's a heretic. I believe he's a false teacher, false prophet. And again, I put him pretty much outside biblical Christianity. But I want to be fair here. When he tells his congregation that, hey, God's going to protect you supernaturally, that, God heals, so we don't need to worry about this. God's going to look after you. That kind of thing. I want to be fair here. That is consistent with what he has taught and preached pretty much going, I think, all the way back in, was it the late 80s, early 90s when I first heard about Pastor Rodney Howard-Browne. I think it was maybe the early 90s, maybe late 80s. When I started hearing about him, hearing some of his sermons, I mean, was straight right there in what I call the wacko charismatic movement, the crazy movement. So he's being consistent with what he teaches. So in other words, in some ways, I respect him. I do. In some ways, I respect him because there's plenty of charismatic churches that tell their congregation, healing is guaranteed. If you have faith, God will heal you. Well, if healing is guaranteed, then the last thing you're concerned with is COVID-19. Because if you get it, you just pray and it's over. It's healed. You don't need to worry about it. So your church should meet. If you're a charismatic church, you should meet. If that's what you believe, I will give Pastor Rodney Howard-Browne credit. He is being consistent with his theology. He believes God guarantees healing. He's telling the people to show up, and he's telling them God's going to supernaturally protect them. There you go. He is being consistent with his teaching. In his eyes, he should meet. In his eyes, coming to church where God will heal you, it is essential. So I think there's at least some consistency. You've got a lot of charismatic churches who teach all of this healing stuff, but they're closed down. Their doors are locked. There's no one there. And you're like, well, wait a minute. I thought you said God guaranteed healing. So I kind of in that sense, I see it. Now my personal feelings here is that he flaunted this whole thing. I mean, he live streamed. They definitely seem to be showing the audience. They wanted everyone to know how many people were there. He definitely has been downplaying the whole virus thing. You can go watch some of the live streams on his YouTube channel. To me, it felt like it was a little bit flaunting it. Maybe I'm wrong, but it felt like that. However, here is the update that I want to share with you. I have it right here. It's from Fox News. Fox News has definitely been covering this. In fact, all the reports I've seen have come from Fox News, but here is some of the latest. This was published 2 hours ago. So again, always trying to be as as close to the time news drops as possible, whenever it relates to things of a theological nature. But here we go. Here's a headline. Florida's pastor's legal team responds to entirely inappropriate arrest. Now, they're calling it an entirely inappropriate arrest. Here is what the story has to say. Florida megachurch pastor Rodney Howard-Browne is defending himself after he was arrested for holding services Sunday in defiance of government orders aimed at curbing coronavirus. Hillsborough County Sheriff Chad Chronister, I think is how you pronounce his name, charged him with unlawful assembly and violation of public health emergency order. But Howard-Browne's conservative legal team, Liberty Counsel, argued there's more to the story. Now, I do believe there's more to the story. Let's see if this brings in some of the details, but let's see what they have to say. The sheriff and Hillsborough County will get a lesson on the Constitution and discriminatory application of the law, Matt Staver, Liberty Counsel founder and chairman, told Fox News. Now, this morning on Christian radio, they were talking about Matt Staver. They were going to have I think they were either going to have him on the air or some audio clips from him, but I finally got out of the car to come into church. So if I get some of those, we may have to come back and revisit this. The sheriff issued an arrest warrant and immediately held a press conference as the pastor turned himself into authorities Monday, where he lives. He was released 40 minutes after paying a $500 bond. Okay, I said 45 minutes yesterday. I think I said about 45 minutes, and I think I did say $500 bond. They go on to say the sheriff, joined by state attorney Andrew Warren and Bishop Thomas Scott, made it clear, we're hoping that this serves as a deterrent. Sheriff Chad, the sheriff's press conference, now this is what the legal representatives for the pastor is saying. The sheriff's press conference was a shaming spectacle full of anger, lacking of facts, complete with a theological lecture about the Bible, Staver said. This over a second-degree misdemeanor before the arrest occurred. So they're acting like the whole press conference was just overblown, went too far, full of anger, a lack of facts, complete with a theological lecture, and they said that this is crazy. Now, you could argue maybe it was more than would typically happen when someone is arrested for a misdemeanor, but they're probably trying to get the message out. Hey, churches, don't do this or your pastor is going to get arrested. So it's probably trying to be a deterrent for other churches to not do this, but who knows? Liberty Counsel argued in a press release that Hillsborough County's orders issued March the 20th and 27th included exemptions and exceptions used by businesses that also should apply to the church. Now, this is a very interesting legal argument. If you're going to, and I stated this earlier and I'll state it again, if the law comes out and says, okay, here's the order, but we're going to make an exception. We're going to offer an exception for this business and this business and this business. Well, can't that exemption also apply to the church? Or should it apply to the church? Should it apply to the church? Now, you would have to ask, can the church conduct its business without meeting together and still function as a church? Some will say biblically no, unless we gather together, we're not being a church and it's not a church service. Some would argue, especially within the Catholicism and transubstantiation and partaking of the body and blood of Christ, according to their theological perspective, that they can't obviously accomplish that without people showing up and a priest, consecrating the host and then the people partaking of it, so that they can't really do business without meeting. All right. So again, a lot has to do with your theological perspective. A lot has to do with how you define what the church is supposed to do. If you define the church as a place that's to equip saints through the teaching of God's word and to feed the flock, well, guess what? You can do that online. So I think this is a hard question. The state obviously is not going to sit there and try to consider all the different theological perspectives. They're not. And we can't expect them to. They're not going to get there and get into an argument. What is a church? What isn't a church? I mean, I don't know why Christians would even think that the state can. They're looking at it. It's a gathering of people, and they can gather online and talk about God and the Bible. That's the way they perceive it. So they perceive it's not essential. But I can understand at least trying to make that argument that it is based off your theology and based maybe on how you want to define certain things. So I think that's probably the most interesting thing here from this update, is trying to argue about how these exemptions and exceptions should be applied. Staver said Howard-Browne and his Tampa church took extra precautions and went above and beyond to be in full compliance with the administrative order, which allows any business to operate under the 6-foot restriction, Staver argues. Now, they were talking about this morning on Christian radio, and I have a hard time believing that you're somehow keeping that 6-foot distance and you did some kind of social distancing when you had the Christian radio this morning was reporting 1,000 people were present, but let's say 500 because that's the original number I saw. 500 people, and when you see the crowd on the live stream, I don't see that social distancing. And once the service is over, people are getting up, people are going into the bathroom. There's no way you're maintaining anything close to the rules for social distancing. I don't even know why you would even try to imply that you were. There's no way. Everyone's walking into one building. Everyone's sitting under one roof. They're all sitting there. People are going to get up. They're going to walk by one another. People going to the bathroom. I mean, now I think they did take some precautions. I just don't think they were going to be able to maintain that distancing rule in any way, shape, or form. They go on to say this. The article does. In addition to following the 6-foot rule, the church staff wore gloves. Now, the Christian radio this morning, they basically said that this church did not follow the 6-foot rule, and that's a lie. They basically came out and said that's a lie. The church did not follow that, and for them to claim that is a lie. And if the legal counsel for a church is lying, then that is a whole different issue. Okay, so I don't know if they did or didn't. What I should do is pull up the video and just watch, and when they show the crowd, see if they've got a 6-foot distance between everyone. But you can go look at it for yourself. Again, there seems to be some debate whether they followed this. I'm saying if they did not, and there's proof that they did not, then that's legal counsel. You can't lie to try to prove a point. They said the church staff wore gloves, gave every person hand sanitizer as they entered. Now that's good. That's all good, and I respect that. That's a good thing. Now, according to them, they spent $100,000 on a hospital-grade system that provides continuous infectious microbial reduction. All right. So that they spent $100,000 on a hospital-grade system that provides continuous infectious microbial reduction that is rated to kill microbes, including those in the coronavirus family. Now, I don't know anything about this system. I don't know how well it works. I haven't heard from any health officials. If they spent $100,000 and put this into the building and it's proven to basically keep people safe, well, one, you think all hospitals would be using it. And two, if it works, then you've got to give the church nothing but credit for it. Now, the sheriff said his command staff met with church leaders ahead of Sunday services to warn them about endangering the congregation. The sheriffs also placed a digital sign on the road near the church driveway that said, "Practice social distancing." All right. Shame on this pastor, the legal staff, and the leaders of the staff to forcing us to do our job. That's not what we wanted to do during a declared state of emergency, the sheriff said. But Howard-Browne argued on Twitter that the church is an essential business and also attacked the media for religious bigotry and hate. There you go. That's this, you're coming after us. Again, what about all the other places that are shut down? What about businesses that are shut down that don't want to be shut down? What about restaurants who would rather be open and let people come in and eat? The Tampa pastor isn't alone in refusing to curtail in-person worship services, despite public health orders designed to stop the virus from spreading. Churches in Ohio, Kentucky, Louisiana have continued services as several states offer some degree of exemption for faith and their orders to shutter non-essential activity during the pandemic. On Friday, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio threatened to shut down any house of worship that defied the state's stay-at-home mandates. Now, what the Fox News report failed to mention, and this to me is an essential part of the story, Fox News and on Christian radio, they completely left this out. In an hour conversation, they didn't even mention this. This is what absolutely makes me upset about this entire situation. The sheriff's office and the officials tried to meet with Pastor Rodney Howard-Browne, and he refused to meet. That is all the reports I have seen. That information needs to be in every report and every discussion. Why didn't he meet with them? Why didn't he meet with them? Why didn't he say, look, I believe we're essential. These are the precautions we're going to take. Come into my church. Let me show you. Here, we purchased this, $100,000. Look at it. Bring in your medical experts. Let them examine it. Let them tell us if they think this will work or not work. If they tell us that it won't work, then okay. Now, of course, this is also to me, this is where Pastor Rodney Howard-Browne was not consistent with his theology. If he's telling the people that God is going to supernaturally protect them and that healing is guaranteed, then why did you spend $100,000 on a piece of equipment that's supposed to kill these viruses and these microbes? That's not supernatural. That's not supernatural protection. So there he's not being consistent with his theology. But I see that in charismatic world all the time. God guarantees healing. And then when I worked in the medical world, can you get me in for an appointment today? Why? Your church says healing is guaranteed. Just go to your church and get healed. Stop calling me for a medical appointment. Go away. All right. So yeah, nothing but frustration dealing with charismatics in my medical career. So that to me, the fact that he refused to meet with the sheriff and with them, that to me is almost like he was pushing for this confrontation. He was pushing to be arrested. He was almost begging, hey, come and get me. Let me become a martyr for this. Let me make a point. And that's not the way Christians are to conduct themselves. Don't do it to make a point. Do it because you feel that you're in the right, and then meet with the officials and say, look, let me explain to you. I believe this is an essential service. You may not, but I do. And here's our theological reasons for believing it's essential. We don't believe that the meeting online is church, and the church is supposed to meet, so we're meeting. But here are all the precautions we're going to take. Can you ask a medical professional to tell us what they think about our precautions? I mean, why not buy masks for everyone in the church? You're handing out hand sanitizers. Why didn't you give everyone hand sanitizers and a mask, and everyone would be required while they were in the building to wear a mask? There you go. That's another precaution. And we've got this piece of equipment. Why don't you reduce the size of, have multiple services throughout the day and reduce the size of the crowd? Like, okay, at 10 a.m., you can have this many people in, and we're going to have this many people in. And why didn't they try to come up with all kinds of different ways? If it's a big mega church, there's probably multiple classrooms. Why didn't you, put the sound and I don't know, have individual teachers in different classrooms? Who knows? You could have tried to work with the officials. The fact that he refused to work with the officials and actually speak to them is what bothers me most about the story. Just meet with the individuals. But there you have it. Now we're going to have a legal pushback. Now, of course, guess what they did not report in that Fox News report? Is he going to meet this Sunday? Is he going to meet Wednesday? If they're going to continue to conduct services, what I want to know, what is the sheriff's department going to do? What is the governor going to do? And what's going to ultimately happen? It could literally play out on the TV screen, members of a church being put in handcuffs. That would be insane. Do you just go after the pastor? Do they shut down the building and basically say you can't use your building? They basically, the government takes temporary ownership of the building? These are big questions. So we'll have to continue to follow the story. I just wanted to give you an update. I'm still trying to process it. And I think is it Virginia? A shelter in place order till June? Now, if that is an accurate report that I saw this morning, I want you to start wrapping your head around that. No church. All the month of April, all the month of May. I can't even comprehend that. I can't even comprehend that. And I think we're going to reach a tipping point. I said yesterday, I'll say it again. I believe mid-April, we're going to reach a tipping point and no one's going to follow the rules. I think you have a short period of time that if you're going to implement rules, you better implement them now. They need to be strong. They need to be clear. There needs to be strong punishment for breaking the rules, and you shut everything down. Maybe you may be able to get it for another 14 days. You got to go all in, because at the end of that 14 days, I'm telling you, whether you like it or not, you're just going to have to release restrictions, because businesses are not going to comply. Everyone's going to start breaking the rules. Churches are going to break the rules. People are going to break the rules. You're not going to get away with. I don't see how you make this to the end of April. I don't. I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong, but that's my initial thoughts. So I wanted to bring you an update this morning. I got other things I want to talk about. So we'll stop this live broadcast. We'll be back in a minute with something else. But there you go. Something to think about, something to follow. You can, again, Christians, if you want to talk about it in private, debate it, argue. Just let's keep it out of the public dispute. Let's keep it out of a public fight. We got other things to do there. But yes, pastors are probably right now, there's a lot of pastors. There's probably all Christian organizations today are probably talking about this. Probably talking about, what do we do? What happens? And, there's so many other things I could throw in, but I'll stop right there. All right, you email me your thoughts about this entire situation, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Do you think there's a tipping point, that we're going to get to a tipping point and that all the restrictions are just nobody's going to follow? How long do you think this can continue? How long can some churches survive without meeting in person? Financially speaking, there's lots of ramifications and lots of things to think about. All right, just pray for pastors, pray for churches. Do everything you can to be encouraging and supportive. Do everything you can to support your church financially. Please don't forget to support your church financially, because some churches, I'm telling you, they probably have the normal amount of money they bring in a weekend on a Sunday. It's probably been cut in half. And some churches, they've got major bills to pay. They got staff to pay. They've got mortgages on their buildings to pay. They got all kinds of bills. Yeah, so please support your church as much as you can. All right. Thank you for listening. Everyone have a great day. Look forward to hearing from you on email. Be safe. Stay informed. Look out for yourself. Look out for your neighbor. Take whatever precautions necessary. And let's make it through this pandemic together. And let's pray that when it's all said and done, the church is stronger for it, and that your Christian life is better off for it as well. May God bless you.